Just to mention, this is actually the third and last session of the series that we've been running with Ping Pong. First one was on frogs. Second one was on lizards, and then now we have snakes. And I will let Ping Pong do the introduction for himself. And okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the talk. Today, I'll be talking about the myths and realities unraveling the secrets of Southeast Asian snakes. So, it's basically a talk on snakes within Southeast Asia. So, a little bit about me before I begin. I am a graduate of zoology from the University of Reading. I did my degree 3 years in the UK. I'm currently working as a freelance fauna specialist for environmental impact consultancies. So basically, what I do is I will go down to sites and look for reptiles and amphibians. And finally, my research interest is in taxonomy, ecology, and bioacoustics. So bioacoustics is the study of animal sounds, very basically. And personally, I'm very interested in frogs, the sounds they produce, and in what context they produce those sounds. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. Today we will talk about the snake diversity in the region. So how many snakes there are, how many families there are. We'll talk about the different fang types as well. So as we all know, there are venomous snakes, non-venomous snakes, and there are quite a fair bit of overlap and some kind of differences in dentition, in teeth type. We will also touch on the habitats in the region, talking about what forest types we have and the associated species that can be found within those habitats. Next, we'll talk about reproduction. Snakes have a very unique way of reproduction in general, so we'll talk a bit about that. We also talk about diet and predation. Because snakes are so diverse, they have a very, very different prey base from species to species. We will also finally touch upon the myths and misconceptions surrounding snakes. As you will come to know, many people actually are terrified of snakes. Some of them even go out of their way to kill them. And there are a lot of misconceptions connected with that. And hopefully, this talk will actually alleviate some of the fears and misconceptions surrounding these beautiful animals. And finally, we will talk about what do you do if you encounter a snake, firstly at home and then in the wild. So without further ado, let's begin. So in Southeast Asia, there are about 17 different families of snakes, spanning about more than 450 species all across the Southeast Asia. And now probably it's more since I last checked. But today we'll be focusing on a few main families. The main ones are the vipers, colubrids, and elapids. So vipers are pretty straightforward. They are your typical viperiid snake with a triangular head, and I'm sure you guys have heard about how to identify them in the field. The next one are your colubrids, which is the largest family of vertebrates in the world, with 2,500 species within this family itself. The reason for that is because before the age of new technology, things that were not vipers and things that were not elapids, everyone clustered them under common. So basically, this is the dumping ground of everything else. The last one we talk about are your elapids. Now, these ones are your cobras, your kraits, and those associated snakes. So, firstly, I'm sure you guys know some snakes are venomous and some not. So, let's talk a little bit about the fang types. Starting with the top left, it's known as Ophistoglyphus. Right? Basically, what that means, it means it's rear fang. Can you guys see those two larger protrusions coming up from the skull? Those are the venom delivery fangs in this group of snakes. They are known as the rear fang snakes, and up till I think the 1800s or late 1800s, they were thought not to be venomous at all, or rather, they were thought to be mildly venomous. Because unlike these two other fang types, it was thought that this did not have an effective venom delivery system. So basically, the teeth shape in this, it has a small groove running down the middle, and instead of injecting the venom, it slowly drips out the fangs and into the wound. However, I believe in the late 1800s, someone actually got bitten by a rear fang snake that he thought was non-venomous, and he actually died. So from then onwards, people started realizing, oh, okay, Just because it doesn't have an effective venom delivery system, or not as effective as the other two, does not mean the venom is not as effective. So moving on to your Proteroglyphus type, this one is associated with elapids. All elapids have this kind of fang structure, which is basically a front fang that is fixed. And the way it's kind of like grooved, or the way its structure is made, is it's like a hypodermic needle, which is completely encased until that near the tip there's actually a hole, and that's where the uh, elapid is able to inject its venom. The next one is solenoglyphus, which basically means hinged fang. So can you see this fang over here and its kind of associated structures? These are very, very commonly associated with vipers. And these are actually the most evolved in terms of dentition. And the reason for that is because for these two other fang types, their fangs cannot move. However, for your vipers, they actually have a hinge, which is why you can see their venom delivery fang is a lot larger than the other two dentition types. And it's because they are able to sheath it within their jaw, and when they are about to strike, they will move the hinge and make it to a strike position and then bite their prey. The last one is known as aglyphus, meaning it doesn't have a venom delivery fang. So all snakes that are aglyphus do not have venom. A good example of that would be your pythons, boas, and constrictors in general. They will have this kind of dentition. As you can see, it doesn't mean they are not, or they're not capable of a bad bite, because they still have rear facing teeth, which are developed to actually hold on to prey, which is why it's like that. So this is basically it. So rear fang snakes, not as venomous, but still able to injure people for the right species. Front fixed fang, associated with your cobras, kraits, and things like that. Hinged front fangs, which are associated with your vipers. And no fangs whatsoever associated with constrictors. So let's talk a little bit about the habitat types within Southeast Asia. Of course, there are more than two habitat types. And if I were to list all of them here, I will be here until 10 o'clock tonight, so I will not do that. We are today only going to talk about two different types of habitats, which are your mangroves and the terracotta forests. I'm sure all of us are quite familiar with mangroves and places like Sungai Buloh or Pasir Ris, or even if you go further north into Lim Chu Kang, right? They are basically dominated by large mangrove trees like this, which have still roots. And mangroves provide a very, very important ecological function to society, and it's that it actually softens the waves that actually approach the shore. So if a tsunami was to approach a well, a good, rather a healthy mangrove ecosystem, the force of the waves will actually be blunted by the presence of the mangrove forest. However, because of development, a lot of countries in Southeast Asia have actually removed mangroves from their coastline, which makes them a lot more vulnerable to the destructive power of tsunamis. So the first associated species we're talking about today is your mangrove pit viper, the first venomous species in Singapore that we'll talk about. And like its name suggests, it's only found in mangroves. It is quite uncommon in Singapore. You will only see them in Pasir Ris, and if you're lucky, you go to Pulau Ubin, you'll see them there. And they are highly variable in color. The main ones you'll see will look like this, dark purplish black in color. However, there are individuals which are almost light yellow or straw in color, and there's even a single individual in Pasir Ris, and if you guys do go down to look for it, keep an eye out for it. It's a large female named Blue, and the reason why it's called Blue is because her facial scales, more specifically the one on her lower jaw, are actually bright blue in color. So they are one of the most highly variable snakes in terms of color within Singapore. The second one that we can talk about is your banded file snake. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking whether or not this is a venomous snake. Before I talk about this species, let me just ask you a question. How many species of venomous or highly venomous snakes are there in Singapore? Who says less than 10? Show of hands. Who says fewer than 10? Okay, okay. Who says More than 10, but less than 20. Okay? Who says more than 50? Okay, a few of you think there are quite a lot of venomous snakes, highly venomous in Singapore, but there are only seven. So those of you who put up your hands for less than 10 are correct. There are only seven species of snakes in Singapore which are considered highly venomous. So coming back to this mallet file snake, a lot of people associate venomous snakes with black and white family, and it's true. We do have two species in Singapore which look like this and who are considered highly venomous. However, this particular individual is actually not venomous at all. They predominantly feed on fish, and their scalation is actually adapted for that. So fish actually have a layer of slime which protects them from the weather, from the surroundings, as well as predators. So how this snake is able to feed on fish without fast-acting venom that kill the fish quickly is it has this very granular, almost like grain-like scales, which is why the scientific name is granulatus. It's describing the texture of the scale. So this allows the snake to be able to grip onto the fish a lot more effectively. And as you can tell, this is quite a soft-bodied snake because it spends the majority of its time in the water. It's actually not a terrestrial snake at all, and it will actually have quite a fair bit of trouble um, sort of like traversing the mangrove mudflats and things like that. So this is very closely associated to mangroves and the intertidal space, which is where you most commonly find them. And this is what it looks like. You see them in the mangrove streams. And they are quite fast. So if you do ever, like I said again, visit Pasir Ris mangroves or any of the intertidal zones in Singapore, keep an eye out for them because these guys are very, very cool. So the next species, next habitat type we're going to talk about are your pterocarp forests. So we need to first find out what pterocarp means. It's basically trees that are in the family of the Pterocarpaceae. I know that's not very helpful, um, but they are trees that dominate the Southeast Asian landscape. This is our predominant habitat type within a pristine um, rainforest. And these are huge, tall trees that are capable of growing up to about 90 meters in height. That is actually the tallest one ever recorded. It's a uh, yellow Meranti tree in Borneo that reached about 90 meters in height. And it produced very iconic winged fruit. So, how many of you here have heard of a Shoria fruit? Shoria? Yeah, quite a fair bit of you. And Shoria are the pterocarps. So they produce these winged fruits, and they fruit once every 10 years. And because the Southeast Asian landscape is dominated by these tall trees, many animals within our region have actually adapted the ability to glide. Because when you think about it, the amount of energy it takes to go down a very tall tree, move to another one, and climb all the way back up, it's not very energy efficient. So many species of animals have actually adapted the ability to glide, and that includes snakes. So this first one we'll talk about is the twin-barred tree snake, also sometimes known as your king-barred fly. And the reason why it's called a flying snake is because it's able, or rather, it has modified ribs that it can flatten, and when it does that, it will jump off the tree, flatten its ribs, and it can actually glide. And in the past, scientists thought that it was random gliding, where it would just jump off a tree and land wherever it lands. But a study done, I believe, in 2007 in the US actually showed that these snakes and this genus of snakes can actually control where they glide very, very precisely. Now, this particular species is basically restricted to our central catchment, which is and Bukit Timah. They are a beautiful species. In my opinion, they should be the national snake of Singapore. It has all our colors. Yeah. And the thing about snakes that climb on trees or are found on trees is they are able to scale almost vertical surfaces. So you can actually see snakes basically just crawling up a tree whenever you're in nature zone. So the next one, this is your paradise tree snake, and you can actually see this one had just landed on this particular tree over here, which is why it's so flat because it still has its modified ribs open up, so to speak. And that is how they actually are able to glide long distances. Not only do they use that gliding, but they use it for thermal regulation as well. So this is how these snakes would actually pass in the sun. We have three of them, three species in Singapore, the paradise tree snake and the twin bark tree snake. The last one is actually an introduced species from Thailand known as the golden tree snake. And it currently is basically only restricted to Gardens by the Bay, but it is considered to be quite common there. So I've got another question for you guys. Do you think these are the same species? Who says yes, same species? Okay. Who says no, different species? Okay. Those of you who said yeah, the right species, the same species, is correct. This is known as the Wagler's pit viper, and they exhibit this interesting thing known as sexual dimorphism, meaning you are able to differentiate males and females not only based on size, but as it's shown, you can differentiate them based on color as well. So you can see this one over here is a female. They get a lot larger than your males. They have sort of very nice black and yellows stripes across the entire body. These guys are able to grow up to about 90 centimeters to about maybe 1.1, 1.2 meters in length. This one right here is a male and it stays small. The maximum length is maybe 30 cm, if not slightly smaller. Not only that, but the juveniles actually look like males. So when a juvenile female is maturing and becoming more mature and about to transition into its female coloration, it will actually, all of these small red and yellow dots on its body will actually lengthen and become the yellow stripes that you see along the female over here. So, like I said, this is a venomous species, our second one that we're talking about today, and it is quite commonly encountered within our nature reserves. The record currently we have is, I think, 11 individuals in a single day, and that was in Bukit Timah. So if you do want to go and find them, that is the best place to see them in Bukit Timah. Not only that, have you wondered why pit vipers are called pit vipers? And the reason for that is because they are able to see in heat vision, basically. So there are two sort of like orifices that are being shown right here. The first one, the one that's nearest to the snout, that is the nostril of the snake. So that's why you breathe and use it actually. The second one, you guys will keep in mind. So the second hole over there is actually the heat sensing pit. Because these snakes predominantly prey on things like birds and small mammals, they will need the ability to actually see the heat signature in order for them to strike and kill the snake, which is what the point of the heat seeking is for. So let's talk about reproduction. So this is a large female wagler mating with a male wagler. So you can see the size disparity. It's almost 3 times larger than the male. So snakes, um, they reproduce via internal fertilization and reproduction external. So basically, you will see snakes mating like this. This one right here, the one in the middle, this one should be the female, and this one should be the male. Now let's talk a little bit about snake genitalia, right? It's interesting because male snakes have this thing known as a hemipenis, which is most of them are shaped like this. Right, and what you're seeing is not the entire reproductive organ of a male snake. It's actually only a single lobe. So male snakes will actually have two. So this one will have two of this will have two, and this one will have two of them as well. This is both important for the snake species as well as researchers. So it's important for snakes because a lot of the times when snakes are threatened, when they feel threatened, they actually do this thing known as everting their happiness, which means they just make it shown. And whether or not that's just a stress response or if it's to actually try and scare the predator away, we are not actually very sure. However, occasionally when they retract their mutinous, they can get stuck. And when that happens, one of them will actually start to rot and decay and actually fall off. So Why snakes have two of them is just in case one of them falls off, so they still are able to breathe. So why they're important to researchers is because many closely related species, an important distinctive feature is actually the morphology of your hemipenis. So some may not have as many spines or spurs on it. Some may be completely smooth. Some may be a lot longer. Some may be like this one, slightly shorter. And that tells us quite definitively what species we are looking at. Most snakes, they were made in pairs. However, there is this other mating behavior which is seen specifically in certain species of bronzebacks. It's known as your mating ball. Now, as you can see, there are three of them in this one. There's only one female, the other two are male. So it's not known as mating ball because a lot of the time when they are observed, they are in a very tight cluster when they're trying to fight over the female. So normally, if more than three, sometimes you can get up to, I believe, there have been cases where five snakes have been seen together, trying to mate. And the current male that's mating with the female will try and fend off the other males by trying to push them off or trying to just stay with the female as long as it can. Currently, very little is known about mating balls in general. So we don't actually know what species do it. We are aware of at least three or two species in Singapore that do it, but we don't know about the rest of them, and we don't know how effective they are at propagating reproduction. So the next one is an interesting one because remember I said most snakes or all snakes actually reproduce by sexual reproduction. That's not true for this particular species right here. This is the Brahmini blind snake, and this is the most common snake in the world. It is found on every single continent except for Antarctica because they will all die and freeze over there if they go there. It's also sometimes known as your flower pot snake because that's how it's usually brought around the world. People, when they transfer horticulture, there will be a few of them inside the soil, and that's how it actually spreads everywhere else. And the reason why they're so successful at spreading around the world is because you only need a single individual. You don't even need a pair. They reproduce by asexual reproduction, meaning they are able to basically clone themselves. Their offspring will be genetically similar to the mother. And there are no males in this species. They are a completely female species. This is known as parthenogenesis. And why this is interesting is because it is quite common or relatively common within invertebrates and microbes, but it is almost non existent in vertebrates. There are some fish do it, and most of the other vertebrates do it reptiles, like this one right here. And these guys, the diet is actually very interesting. The diet is actually termites. So what they do is they'll actually go to a termite mound or a termite um, trail, and they will bite the head of the termite and consume the body. The reason for that is because the termite's head contains toxin, which will kill the snake. So it will actually just consume the body and leave the head alone. And it's called a blind snake, but it does actually have eyes. As you can see right here, this very, very small dot on its face. So that is its eyes. Normally snakes will actually have this thing known as your ocular scale, which is a thin, clear scale that covers the eye that protects it from external damage. However, blind snakes and a lot of snakes associated with the leaf litter and forest floor will have just a normal scale over their eyes. So although they can see, they can't see very well, which is fine for them because most of the time they are brown shade, which is why they've actually evolved with the ability. Poison is that poison generally has to be ingested in order for it to affect an animal, whereas venom is injected. Where these two things overlap is actually if it enters your eye. If venom enters your eye or poison enters your eye, it affects you in the same way, which is why spitting cobras are so effective at their defensive measures by spitting venom, right? So if it goes to your eye, um, you will still get affected, right? Whereas if a spitting cobra will spit on your skin, you'll be fine if you as long as you wash the venom off, unless you have an open wound or something. However, there are snakes that are both poisonous and venomous. An example of this is the blue-necked keelback, which can be found in Singapore but is considered quite rare. And if you can see its neck over here, that's has like a patch of black and slightly light blue. That is where the poison gland is actually located. So in this snake, it uses its venom mainly for to get prey, to subdue prey, and it uses its poison to as a defensive measure. So its poison will be detrimental to whatever tries to eat it, as well as being very foul tasting. So if you ever see this in the wild and it has like a speck of white liquid around its neck area, it will be its poison. However, this is actually a rare fang snake, but the poison, sorry, the venom is actually medically significant to humans, and this was actually found out by one of my mentors, Subarash Rajathurai. He was bitten by one in, I believe, 2005 or something like that, early 2000s. And back then they were thought not to be venomous, so it bit him and he just let it bite him because it's supposed to not be venomous. But after he removed the snake, he went to the toilet to wash blood and he actually collapsed. Thankfully, they do not have very, very potent venom. So if do not get bitten by this anyway, but if well, he was bitten and he did not die, he basically just had heart palpitations and just intense pain in his finger where that was bitten. So thankfully, this doesn't have strong enough venom to kill an average healthy adult. However, we should still not eat it. So here's a closer look at the venom gland. As you can see, when it's threatened, it will actually flatten its body and flare its venom, sorry, poison gland to try and make it a target for predators to go for. Apart from being so brightly colored, having poison, it is also able to mimic cobras. So it is able to flatten its neck and raise its head above the ground. And you can see two black spots on its throat. That is to mimic eye spots to try and chase the predator away. And these guys predominantly feed on frogs, and it is actually thought that they get their poison, or at least a component part of their poison, from toads. So what they'll do is they'll eat the toads, and toads are poisonous, so they will sequester the poison and use it as part of their um, arsenal of defense, basically. So now while we're on the topic of diet, let's talk a little bit about predation and diet. So what do snakes eat firstly, and how do they subdue the prey? Snakes basically eat anything that can fit in their mouths. However, those are your generalists. There are very specific cases where snakes only eat a certain prey item, and we'll be talking about that. And it's always very interesting to talk about how snakes subdue their prey because when you think about it, they don't have limbs, they don't have hands, they have nothing to help them um, apart from their mouth, basically. So, one way snakes are able to kill the prey and consume them is through the use of venom. And that is one of the more common ways where they inject venom into the prey, quickly kill them, so that they are able to consume them. And most snakes consume their prey whole. The first one we'll be talking about today is your king cobra. This is the third species of highly venomous snake we'll be talking about today. And it is actually the largest species of venomous snakes or venomous snake in the world. I believe the record right now is from India. I think it's maximum length of 5.24 meters. And that is very, very impressive when you consider it is also a venomous snake. Most of the time, venomous snakes don't get very big because a lot of the protein goes into venom manufacturing. But the king cobra is very large and is also highly, highly venomous. And if you take a look at the name of this genus and why it's called king, so if you ever are reading literature or anything like that and you come across as a snake that has a moniker king, it usually means that it feeds on other snakes. So the king cobra, the king rat snake, and the king snake in the US, they all feed on other snakes. And it is very, very widespread in Asia. And actually, a recent study has shown that um, previously it's thought to be a single species, but it's shown to be five different species. So that research is in the works, and there are going to be new species of king cobras very, very soon. These guys predominantly prey in Singapore. They predominantly prey on pythons. Yeah. So what they'll do is they will find a python, and a lot of the times they'll have a fight. So they'll fight it, and the python will retaliate by coiling around the king. But most of the time, the python will actually die, and what will happen is the king cobra will go away while the python is dying and writhing on the ground. It will leave for up to about 8 to 9 hours, and eventually it will find its way back and actually consume the python whole. This particular individual was seen in Sungai Buloh in 2021. A friend of mine had actually seen it kill the python, so she called me down. By the time I went there, the king was gone. So I waited about 4 hours for it to come back, and when it came back, it actually had to chase a monitor lizard away from eating its prey, and it took about 45 minutes to consume the entire python. This was a relatively small one, by the way. So this, I believe, was about maybe 1.5 meters in length. And when you think about the growth 5, that's still considered a small one. So, and when you think about it, it's actually a very convenient way of eating prey because, for example, if you look at the wagyu viper, it has to fit all of the limbs and all of the awkward parts of the lizard into its own mouth. But when it's eating a snake, it's basically just trying to put a straw in another straw, right? That's basically what's happening. And I know that's by humans, but a lot of snakes actually eat other snakes because of the ease of consumption. Another example is your banded crane. Yes, very good. So this is the fourth species of venomous snake we're talking about today. And it's the only species of crane in Singapore. So if you ever see a black and white banded snake um, on land, basically, most of the time it will be this individual. And it is quite big as well, capable of growing up to 2.3 meters. And it also feeds predominantly on other snakes. They are most commonly encountered, or still not very commonly encountered, on Pulau Ubin. And we actually noticed a difference in snake diversity. So in Pulau Ubin, the mud snakes there are not as common. Quite likely it's because there are all of these cranes going around and slurping them up, basically. They are also highly variable in color. The Singaporean form tends to have black and white bands, but if you go to Malaysia, if you go to Thailand, if you go to Java, they tend to be black and yellow instead. And there's also a form where it's striped instead of being banded. Yeah, so this is what it looks like from the top. It's very clear cut, checkered banding along the body. So let's talk about another one that eats snakes. This is a beautiful, beautiful snake. It's known as a Malayan blue coral. And this is actually one of my favorite snakes in Singapore. Again, this is a relatively large one. It can grow up to about 1.8 meters in length, although it is rare to find them at that size. Most of the ones I've seen in the wild are at most a meter or 1.2 meters in length. Um, and these guys have actually the longest venom glands by proportion in the entire world. They actually span 1/3 of its body. And all the snakes within this Calliophysis genus they are also known as a long glanded coral snakes because they have, like I said, extremely long venom glands. As you can see, this coral snake differs greatly from the ones in America, and we will talk a bit about that later on. So your Asian coral snakes are not related at all to your American ones. They are very, very different lineages of snakes, although they are still within the same family. And to take it one step further, the blue coral actually has specialized venom specifically for snakes. So this venom actually targets snakes and immobilizes them a lot quicker than, for example, the crate would or the cobra would, which makes this a highly specialized um, snake. And as you can see, it has very bright colors. This is mainly to tell predators to warn them that look, I'm venomous. Don't try and mess with me. If you ever see one and its tail is up like this, and the underside is all of this color, just a bright neon orange. It feels threatened. It will also occasionally flatten its body and show its belly. So if you see bright colors like this, it feels threatened, and you just give it some space. So there is another species of coral snake in Singapore. It's known as your Malayan banded coral snake. And actually, there are records of the um, Malayan blue coral eating the Malayan banded coral snake. So these guys are a lot smaller, the maximum size of about 50 centimeters. However, they do also feed on snakes. The diet of the blue coral is a lot more varied. They can take more, they can take larger prey, they can take different species of prey, whereas your banded Malayan coral snake predominantly feeds on smaller things known as reed snakes within the leaf itself. So these guys also flatten their body, and this is why it's called banded coral because their ventral scales are black and white, black and white, black and white. So this one, we found it as it was actually threatened, and the tail also does raise it. It's not as vibrant as your Malayan coral, but it still shows that it's very very venomous. So we covered 6 species of venomous snakes in Singapore. We're just left with one. So apart from venom, other ways of killing snakes are basically constriction. So this is the reticulated python. It is also the longest snake in the world. Period. So we're the longest snake, we're the longest venomous snake. It is able to grow up to almost about 9 meters in length. And actually, Cambridge University has a £50,000, or was it $10,000? Anyway, they have a money reward for someone who can find, who can find the a 10-meter one. So if you ever find a 10-meter one, give Cambridge a call. They pay some money. Although make sure you have the proper permits to actually collect it. Don't just take the thing and go. Right? So yeah. Um, they are natural pest control. Now, what do I mean by that? Right? They are very commonly found in urban spaces, so drains, and there was actually a few found in Tampines swimming pools, just drinking. Um, the reason why they inhabit our drain system is because they feed on rats. Now, overseas in places like Indonesia, Malaysia, where they get larger, they will take occasionally take dogs, cats, and even deer or like wild boar. However, in Singapore, because we don't really have a lot of those animals running around, except for dogs and cats, these guys are predominantly feeding on rats, which is why they are natural pest control. And a friend of mine who actually did research on this species found that they do control the population of rats very, very well to the point where if we were to remove them, there would be an explosion in rat population. Yeah. So they have this very interesting scale feature known as iridescence. A lot of snakes have it where if the light hits it at the right angle, it looks like it has a rainbow on the snake itself. And this is actually why it's called the um, reticulated python, is because it has bands of reticulated blood patterning across the entire body. So these guys do also have heat sensing pits. Like I said, they predominantly feed on mammals. However, their pits are a lot less sensitive and less evolved than that in pit vipers. So pit vipers are able to look at the prey with a lot of precision, where these guys do need to rely on their eyesight and sense of smell as well. Question for you guys: how do pythons kill the prey? I'll give you multiple choice, very simple. Okay, so do they crush the bones? Who says they crush the bones and wait for them to die? Okay, do they stop them from breathing? So show of hands, who thinks they stop them from breathing? Okay, majority of them. And you would be right in the 2010s because that's what scientists thought as well. That when a constrictor, not just a python, but constrictors, when they grab onto the prey and squeeze them, a lot of people thought that the prey suffocates. But what happens? Sorry. Yeah. But what actually happens is because they are exerting so much pressure on the prey's body, it stops the blood flow. So effectively, what happens? The prey's heart will actually give out, so they die of a heart attack instead of being suffocated. And this is fairly new research. Like I said, it was actually only figured out in 2015 that pythons cause the prey to have heart attack instead of suffocating them. So pythons are not the only ones that use constriction. Things like your paradise tree snake also use constriction. And the difference is a lot of the times paradise tree snakes do not wait for the prey to die. The only reason why they put so many coils around the prey is to hold it in place so that they can position their mouth and their head and swallow it whole. So pythons will wait for the prey to die because a lot of the time they're mammals and if they're not dead, they can just take off running. But for other snakes like these, they will just take it whole regardless of if it's alive or not. And constriction also works on other species of snakes. This, oh sorry, this one right here. So this is a sunbeam snake that's eating a second one over here. This one right here is known as the barred kukri snake. And this is actually a photo of it constricting it. And what it's doing is very similar to the paradise tree snake where it's just holding it down so it can position its head to swallow the snake whole. This particular occurrence, it held onto the kukri snake for almost 45 minutes, but it took it about 20 seconds for it to consume it whole. So really, the only reason why they are holding it like this is so that it doesn't run away and not at all to kill the other snake. The snake will die when they're swallowed. Now, so far I've been talking about vertebrate prey, right? Like I said before, snakes do have a very, very varied diet, and some snakes actually specialize in eating slugs. And when I mean slugs, I mean slugs and snails. So how do they do that? Right? We do have quite a few species, and this one is the blunt-headed slug snake. This is a Bornean slug snake, and we have more on the Indian slug snake, and this is actually found in Singapore, the white-spotted slug snake. These guys, unfortunately, are not native, and they are native to kind of like northern Thailand and the Thai area. How they eat is because they have very specialized dentition, which was not covered in the edition slide, because these have highly, highly specialized ones. It's known as asymmetric dentition. So you can see that this side of the snake is actually longer, or the snake's head is slightly longer and more has more scales. This side is shorter, and the reason for that is because that side of the snake, so on the right, has a lot more teeth and they make use of that by biting onto the snail's body and slowly, slowly pulling them out of the shell. And they've also actually evolved a novel way of extracting the snake. So normally snakes' jaws either open or close, but slug snakes are able to move their jaws forward and back. So what they'll do is they will have their multiple teeth fighting onto the body of the snail, and they will just slowly, very slowly move it back into the mouth until they consume the entire snail without the shell. Now, of course, as you can probably tell, this will only work on snails with a certain shell structure. And that is actually also shown where some snails, so these are the ones that they can commonly feed on, which has a clockwise curve, right? This is known as clockwise curve. And something like this, where the shell curls the other way, it's not actually different individuals, I just mirrored the snail. So if it curls anti-clockwise, those snakes will not be able to eat them at all. Yeah. So this is literally an evolutionary arms race happening right before our eyes. It'll take a few million years for it to actually to see any um, headway between both of them, but this is actually how species develop, how species evolve. So another species that has a very interesting diet is your Gerard's water snake. It's again found in your mangroves and it's uncommon in Singapore. What these guys do is because you guys know uh, crabs are able to molt and shed their skin, and when they are doing that, what they do is they secrete a certain um, chemical that allows them to soften their shell so that they can get out of it. Right? These snakes are able to smell that chemical, and they will go for the freshly molted crabs. So these, how many of you here like eating soft shell? Yeah, quite a few. So these things also love them. In fact, they are one of the only prey that these guys feed on, soft shell crabs. And if the crab is a bit too big to swallow whole, they will actually rip it apart. And speaking of ripping something apart, that's what this snake does. It's known as the crab eating snake. Again, it's a mangrove species and can be found in Singapore. They also feed predominantly on your crabs. However, they rely on a special adaptation that crabs have. So if any of you have worked with crabs or have prepared crabs before, you will know that if you pull a bit too hard on their limbs, it will actually just come off. And I'm not saying like ripping it off by sheer force, because the crab is actually the one that ejects that limb. So it is a way of predator avoidance with crabs, where if a predator has hold of its claw, it is able to just eject the claw and run away. So this snake actually makes use of that adaptation by holding onto the claw with quite a fair bit of grip until the crab itself ejects it. So it will be able to swallow it um, by itself without the rest of the crab. So these are the two different species of mangrove snakes that feed on has highly specialized diets. So that is it for the diet section. Let's talk about the last better species of snake. I put it here because I couldn't really find out anywhere else to fit it in the presentation. So this is known as the equatorial spitting cobra. Now, why I say it's the only true cobra in Singapore is because true cobras are within the genus of Naja. And if you remember, the king cobra is actually in the genus called Ophiophagus. So it is not considered a true cobra. This is the most common venomous snake in Singapore, and it can be seen in parks, anywhere basically that has any bit of shrubbery. It feeds on small mammals and reptiles and some toads as well. And the thing about this species that makes it unique is that it's able to spit venom. Unlike its African counterparts, African spitting cobras can spit up to 2 meters in length with deadly precision. These guys kind of more spray the venom and hopefully hit the target. So they're not as good at their accuracy, but you still should be careful. So if you ever see a large black snake in the wild, do be careful because they are able to spit venom. And if you do get venom stuck in your eye, wash it out with as much water as you can get and get yourself to the hospital as quickly as possible. Because if you let it sit, you can, there's a chance of you going blind. So that is basically the talk right now on Southeast Asian diversity. Let's actually move on to the fear of snakes. Now, what you see is a survey done by YouGov on, I believe, about 1,000 Singaporeans, and they asked them what their greatest fear was. If you look at number three, it's reptiles. So it's only under drowning and fire, and 47% of people surveyed found them extremely scary. So they feared them a lot. And 43% feared them a little. So 80% of Singaporeans, at least according to this poll, have some form of fear towards reptiles, right? And that includes snakes. So just a show of hands, how many of you here are very afraid of snakes? Okay, how many of you here are a little bit afraid of snakes? Okay, so it is a decent amount. So we'll talk a bit about the common misconceptions associated with snakes. So uh, yeah. So the first one is that snakes are aggressive and will chase you. This is wrong because snakes are not aggressive; they are defensive. They will only strike and they will only bite for three reasons. Firstly, if they are looking for prey. Secondly, if they are in combat with another snake. And thirdly, if they are disturbed. So the only reason why any human would be bitten by a snake is if they first disturb them, which is why you should always be careful where you step when you're in nature, because accidentally stepping on a snake might cause it to bite you. Although most of the time, the snake, if it's not cornered, will just run away, will just slither away. Now, the second one is how a lot of people always ask us, how do I keep snakes from my compound, right? And a lot of people say, oh, can I just use sulfur? Will that help? And the simple answer is no, it doesn't affect snakes, it doesn't chase snakes away. If you put sulfur in your garden, you put a lot of it in your garden, the only thing that will happen is all your plants will die, right? And that is actually one of the better ways of chasing the snakes away, because if they don't have places to hide, they will not visit your garden. But I'm assuming you guys want a live garden, so sulfur does not work. And the logic behind it is sounds good because it says all the firstly they don't like the smell of sulfur, and secondly, when snakes go over sulfur, the small powdery bits go in between their skin and actually irritate them, so they'll never sneeze. But that's simply not true. So multiple studies across different countries have tried using sulfur as a deterrent to snakes. It does not work. So please save your gardens, save your money. Don't buy sulfur. The third one is that snakes are slimy. So as I've showed you across the past couple of slides, they have scales. They do not, unlike fish, they do not have a outer layer of slime. So if you were to ever go to a zoo where they have a snake that you can touch, I do encourage you to go out and touch captive snakes that you're allowed to. Don't just randomly go and grab a snake because you will get bitten. Um, Snakes are actually smooth. They are actually very, very smooth. Yeah. Very good, nice. Yeah. So another one is that if you kill a snake, its partner will come with you, and there are other variations of this where you kill a snake, its partner will wait 40 days and come back and kill you again and things like that. So first of all, snakes do not mate for life, so they do not have a concept of a partner. And second of all, even if they did, how they recognize you. Right? So this doesn't exist. If a snake dies within your vicinity, it will not come back. Its partner will not come back and kill you. Another one is colorful snakes are venomous. And hopefully, as my slides have shown, while colorful snakes can be venomous, they aren't necessarily only colorful. Like the black sitting cobra is completely black, but it is also highly venomous. Now, on that note, let's talk a bit about um, sort of like misconceptions that is associated with identifying snakes. So, have any of you seen a poster like this before where they say, oh, venomous snakes have slits for eyes, all venomous snakes have pupils, have larger pupils for eyes, or their belly scales will be double in venomous snakes and single in non-venomous snakes. Anyone saw anything like that? Okay, a few of you. So, this is not true worldwide. It might be true to where this poster was originally made, but it is most definitely not true um, in the rest of the world. So let's first talk about the elliptical pupil. King cobras have circular pupils, so they are highly venomous. So what the point I'm trying to make is that you shouldn't necessarily follow general advice that people tell you. Another one is red touches yellow, kill a fellow. Red touches black, friend of Jack. This is a rhyme used by Americans to recognize the difference between the highly venomous coral snakes and non-venomous milk snake. If you do that in Southeast Asia, you will find out very quickly that this rhyme does not work. The only way to reliably tell whether or not a snake is venomous or non-venomous is by reading up on literature of snakes in the region. So if you are worried or if you are afraid that you might be envenomated by a snake, read up on the literature of where you're about to go or in the region which you're in and learn how to differentiate venomous snakes from non-venomous snakes. And another thing you can do is just don't go too close to snakes, because like I said, they won't bite unless they are threatened. So if you give a good amount of distance, they will not come to. Another one is constrictors will measure its prey by moving alongside it to kind of like gauge whether or not it's long enough to consume it. If a constrictor does that in the wild, the prey will run away. So this is not true. What they'll do, most constrictors will actually lie in wait for the prey to come across them and they just strike it. If it's too big, it's too big. They'll just regurgitate it and just leave it there. But if it's definitely take the kill if they can. So next one is important, which is why there's an associated photo. Um, this is very important for medical stuff. If for whatever reason you are bitten by a snake, especially a venomous one, some people will say, "Oh, make a cut above the wound." For example, if I get bitten on my hand, they'll say, "Oh, make a cut on my forearm so to bloodlet and let the venom out." It does not work. The only thing you will do is you will cut yourself and introduce a second risk factor. So another one is sucking out the venom will help. Either yourself or having a friend do it for you. It does not work The only thing it does actually again is introduce bacteria to the wound, so that increases your chances of getting a secondary infection, right? Um, Another one is if there's no antivenom, you will die. So for the common snakes in Singapore, there's no antivenom. For the crate, there is no species specific antivenom. For our vipers, there is no species specific antivenom either. You will, if you do get envenomated by a venom species, if there is no antivenom, what they will do is treat the symptoms. It would be the best if there's antivenom, but doctors are able to treat the symptoms and kind of like um, make sure that not so much of your tissues are damaged. So if you ever get envenomated by um, a snake, get to the hospital as quickly as you possibly can. So now, what do you do if you encounter a snake? If you find it at home, do not corner it, like I said before, because they can get very defensive and you can potentially get bitten. Secondly, is to leave it alone because the more you leave the snake alone, the less it will move. Because you don't want the snake just slithering around your house and going to a crevice where you will not see it again. And that brings me to point number three: be aware of where it is in the house. At least vaguely, so if your living room, keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't go anywhere else, and call acres and parks. They will come down for free to remove the snake for you. Right? If acres and parks doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't answer, you can call certain pest control companies. They will come down and help you remove it, but of course you will have to pay for that. It's not free. So what do you do is avoid it? Firstly, don't approach it. Give it about 2 to 3 meters, depending on how large the snake is. If it's a 7 meter python, don't go 2 to 3 meters. Give it about 10 meters, right? Take a lot of photos, put them on social media. There is a lot of associated fear with snakes, like I previously discussed, and there realistically isn't actually anything to be afraid about when it comes to snakes. Because, like I said again, if you leave them be, they will leave you alone, right? So, what do you do if you're actually bitten by snake? So, firstly, do not panic. I know it'll be difficult for someone who's just gotten bitten by a venomous snake to not panic, but the reason is if you panic, your heart will beat faster, and when that happens, it circulates the venom faster. So it will have a much quicker time to actually affect your biology, your physiology. It is possible. Keep the wound below your heart. So I'll use an example. If I get bitten on my right hand, I won't be going around doing this, right? Because this will make the venom travel to my body quicker. So keep it below the heart and keep calm. And go to the nearest hospital as quickly as you possibly can. In Singapore, this isn't really that much of an issue because most of the time you're at most half an hour away from hospital, and most of the time if you get there on time, you'll be okay, right? There is another one which I didn't put up because it's a bit contentious. So, how many of you heard that if you get bitten by a snake, you need to put a tourniquet on it? Okay, so a few of you, and in different areas in the world, it's some people say put on a tourniquet. Some people say never put on a tourniquet. And let me give you the context as to why they have differing ideas in that. So, firstly, for putting on a tourniquet, most of the time it's in areas where the healthcare isn't very good, or it's in areas where there are more rural countryside places where it takes them 2 to 3 to 6 hours to get to a place where you can treat the venom or treat the wound properly. So it's basically just to localize damage because when you put a tourniquet on a wound, it keeps the blood in that particular part of your body. And what happens if the venom is kept there, that limb will die. So that limb will almost definitely have to be amputated. So that is the drawbacks of putting on a tourniquet. But losing a limb is a lot better than losing a life, which is why they still do it in some parts of the world. However, the bad thing about that is if you don't know if the snake that bit you is highly venomous or mildly venomous, so most mildly venomous snakes they don't actually affect human physiology that much. At most, the wound will itch or you may have localized symptoms. But if you put a tourniquet on, it, like I said again, will concentrate all the venom within that particular part of your body and can also cause cell death. So, within Singapore's context, you should not be putting a tourniquet on. Just get to the hospital as quickly as you possibly can. However, the cases of snake bites in Singapore are very, very There we go. When was the last time anyone here heard of someone getting firstly bitten by a snake and secondly dying because it was a venomous snake? Yeah. The last time anyone died was from a cobra bite, I believe, in the 1980s. And it was a very, very elderly gentleman. So it could possibly be due to other health complications as well, not just venom. Yeah. So I will be happy to discuss any other um, questions that you guys have, or any other or any other ideas or things that you guys have. So please feel free to ask your questions now. But before that, there are actually a list of useful resources. Ecology Asia and Reptile Database. By the way, for those of you who think those, the slides will be sent to you, so you don't have to. Um, these ones are good general websites to read about snakes and read about animals in the region. Um, I am from the Herpetological Society of Singapore, and what we do is we go out giving talks like this. We actually conduct free guided walks for once a month in order to dispel fears surrounding reptiles and amphibians. So, if you do want to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, we usually post our walk details 2 to 3 weeks before the walk itself. And like I said, it's completely free. So if you have the time and it's a weekend, do feel free to join us. Yeah. So thank you so much for listening, and I will take questions.